Hello there, welcome to Planet America's Weekend Edition. I'm John Barron.
And I'm Licciardello, and we have a situation.
33-year-old Zohran Mamdani won last night's Democratic primary for New York City mayor.
Tonight, we made history.
People are prepared to stand up and fight for change.
So is Zohran the Destroyer the leader of a death cult in Manhattan?
A socialist Muslim may be about to become the mayor of America's largest city. Cue freak out!
And we're going to get an expert assessment on the attacks on Iran's nuclear program. Cue another freak out! But first...
President Trump isn't just standing by his claims that Iran's nuclear weapons program has been totally obliterated by American bunker busters and Israeli airstrikes. He is doubling down.
I think they're going to take their oil. They're going to have some missiles, and they'll have some defense. I think they've had it. I mean, they just went through hell. I think they've had it. I believe it was total obliteration. I believe they didn't have a chance to get anything out because we acted fast. If it would have taken 2 weeks, maybe, but it's very hard to remove that kind of material. Very hard and very dangerous for them to remove it. Plus, they knew we were coming, and if they know we're coming, they're not going to be down there.
Interesting logic. They knew we were coming, yet they wouldn't have done anything to protect their stockpile of enriched uranium or gas centrifuges? The president has been pushing back as well against reports in the New York Times and on CNN that according to preliminary assessments by the US government's own Defense Intelligence Agency, the American strikes only set back Iran's nuclear program by a few months.
Based on a battle damage assessment that was carried out by U.S. Central Command, essentially looking at the images and looking at what was actually damaged, the Defense Intelligence Agency has assessed that the core components of Iran's nuclear program are largely intact and that Iran's nuclear program has essentially only been set back by months.
The White House did acknowledge the existence of that DIA assessment. There's nothing fake about it, but they described it as flat out wrong and leaked by an anonymous low-level loser in the intelligence community. And, again, they claim total obliteration of their targets, even though she was simply reporting accurately what the government's own top-secret assessment was at the time. The president took aim at the reporter.
Natasha Bertrand should be fired from CNN. I watched her for 3 days doing fake news. She should be immediately reprimanded and thrown out like a dog.
Meanwhile, back on CNN, there was more bad news for the president.
A senior Israeli intelligence source tells me that Israel's own BDA, or bomb damage assessment, of the U.S. strike specifically on the Fordo underground nuclear facility mirrors that CNN is reporting from the Defense Intelligence Agency, and that is that the damage from those strikes was limited and perhaps even less extensive than believed initially.
With all that leaking out, the Trump administration then started circling the wagons. CIA Director John Ratcliffe issued a statement which he said confirmed CIA intelligence, which contradicts illegally sourced public reporting regarding the destruction of key Iranian nuclear facilities. But then in the statement, Ratcliffe said that Iran's nuclear program had been, quote, severely damaged, and that several key Iranian nuclear facilities were destroyed and would have to be rebuilt over the course of years. So, at that point, only the president, his press secretary and the defense secretary were the ones using the word obliterated. Ratcliffe said several facilities were destroyed and would take years to rebuild. There's a difference. He did not say all of that. So, it's also consistent with the reported Israeli assessment that the damage to the most well-protected and critical facility, the one at Fordo, may indeed be limited.
There's so many conflicting reports, though, John. Every man and his dog is leaking what supposed info they want to get out there in public. For instance, according to an IDF spokesperson, the analysts from their intelligence directorate and Air Force found they did significantly damage Iran's nuclear program, and they set it back by years. He said years. Obviously, we're not going to know the truth till we get independent analysts on the ground verifying what's left of Iran's program. The problem is that might be never. The Iranian parliament has predictably already approved a bill to suspend cooperation with the IAEA. Now, that will need final approval from Iran's Supreme National Security Council to become official, but they're going to get that. That's the thing with bombing. You lose all the advantages of diplomacy. Having said that, Trump has already arranged talks between the US and Iran next week in which he'll likely seek a commitment from Iran to end their nuclear ambitions, and presumably that will also involve allowing inspectors. Only problem is that Trump is so sold on this obliteration narrative of his that he also said, we may sign an agreement, I don't know, to me, I don't think it's that necessary. So is Trump so wedded to this narrative of his that he'll let Iran not verify their nuclear program has been completely destroyed? We'll find out. And remember, even if the American attacks did completely obliterate Iran's known enrichment facilities, that's assuming there are no other facilities. But only days before Israel started the war, Iran said it had built and would activate another nuclear enrichment facility. They didn't reveal its location, but they described the site as already built, prepared, and located in a secure and invulnerable place. So that seems relevant, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. You can't bomb what you don't know exists. But John, Iran should be aware that if any of this does come out, or if they mess around with Trump too much, there is someone there who is just chomping at the bit to restart a war with them, and that's old mate Lindsey Graham. This was him 2 days ago.
So what happens in the next few days is going to determine the course of history for the state of Israel and the region for decades to come. To our friends in Israel, finish the job. Do what you have to do to bring about the regime change that will allow your children to sleep through the night. To the American people, wake up. Understand what we're fighting. The Ayatollah is not normal. These are not normal people.
Is Lindsey Graham normal?
He's the arbiter, yes.
Glass houses, Lindsey. Look, you got to give him points at least for consistency.
Do we, though? I'm not sure. Now, this is Defence Secretary Pete Hegseth last Sunday when he spent more time in his briefing sucking up to the American president than he did actually praising America's own armed forces. And he, too, was also claiming obliteration.
Iran's nuclear ambitions have been obliterated. Many presidents have dreamed of delivering the final blow to Iran's nuclear program, and none could until President Trump. The operation President Trump planned was bold, and it was brilliant, showing the world that American deterrence is back. When this president speaks, the world should listen, and the U.S. military, we can back it up.
OK, let's just back that up for a moment. Trump did not plan this mission. It has been planned for years. Trump was the president who finally said, yep, do it, when Biden and Obama had said, no, let's not. That may or may not have been the right call, and Iran's nuclear program may or may not have been obliterated, severely damaged, or mildly inconvenienced. We do not know, and nor, it seems, do Trump or Hegseth. But like his president, Pete Hegseth, the former Fox News weekend host, isn't happy with the way the rest of the media has been reporting on the damage assessment produced by the DIA, and he claims ignoring a whole lot of other evidence.
Whether it's fake news, CNN, MSNBC, or the New York Times, there's been fawning coverage of a preliminary assessment. I've had a chance to read it. Every outlet has breathlessly reported on a preliminary assessment from DIA. I'm looking at it right now. Again, it was preliminary, a day and a half after the actual strike, when it admits itself in writing that it requires weeks to accumulate the necessary data to make such an assessment. It's preliminary. It points out that it's not been coordinated with the intelligence community at all. There's low confidence in this particular report.
Irony obviously died the moment that Pete Hegseth accused the rest of the media of fawning. But again, we do not know the facts yet. What we do know is that Trump and Hegseth both have a problem. It is a lack of credibility. They are known liars. Trump even lies about the height of Trump Tower, not to mention lying about elections, his wealth, dating Madonna, his golf scores. The list is endless. Meanwhile, Pete Hegseth, he is traditionally unqualified to be the United States Defence Secretary by any measure. He is only there because he spent years on Fox News praising Donald Trump, and he's doing the same thing now. and it's kind of cringeworthy, Chaz.
Give him a break, John. He's just trying to keep his job a little bit longer than Tulsi Gabbard. And I think he will. I think he'll get there.
That won't be too steep a hill to climb at this point, I don't think. For more on all of this, we are joined by Jonathan Panikoff. He is a former career US intelligence officer who has served in numerous high-level roles, including the National Intelligence Council, where he assessed the Middle East for policymakers. He prepared the Presidential Daily Brief, and he supported the transition between Trump and Joe Biden. Jonathan Panikoff, welcome to Planet America's Situation Room. What is your take on all of this? We've got these various different assessments that are floating around out there of varying qualities, and then we've got the president insisting on obliteration. What do you think?
I think it's really too early to know, and I know that doesn't make anybody happy particularly, but the intelligence behind this to know how much damage was actually done is much more of an art than a science. And it takes information, and that information takes time to gather. I think the early assessments are predicated largely from DIA on, imagery, on what they could see, on what they were initially hearing. But if it really was low confidence, that shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. The reality is, in order to figure out what was really hit and what's operational and what's not, you really need either people on the ground, either an agreement by the Iranians to allow the IAEA in, or you need some additional intelligence information that's going to be able to corroborate, look, this is what was struck, this is what was damaged, this is what was not. I think it's absolutely true and very likely that the Iranian nuclear program was set back significantly. And I think that significantly probably means at least 6 months or 9 months. But could it mean a year or 2 or 5? I think that's a bigger question that we just don't know yet.
So are you saying it's literally impossible to know for sure what state Iran's nuclear program is in until we get a boots-on-the-ground report?
I won't say completely impossible. I think you can put together a variety of pieces of information like a puzzle, fragments of information that come in, and eventually get a pretty clear picture of what was hit. Boots on the ground through the IAEA inspectors are going to be the clearest way to be able to tell exactly what was destroyed and what was not. But look, even in that case, there's still a real question about whether or not Iran was able to get 400 kilograms of highly enriched uranium out of Fordo before the U.S. strike occurred. And if that was the case, then what you're really talking about is, okay, are there secret facilities elsewhere? And that shouldn't be a surprise if they are, given that almost all of Iran's nuclear facilities started as clandestine facilities and eventually were found out and then only then were declared to the IAEA. So I think there's a lot of questions, but it doesn't just have to be about these sites in particular. There's real questions about whether the uranium was also ferried out of Fordo, for instance.
You mentioned potential secret facilities. Directly before the war, Iran announced they were about to open a new enrichment facility in a secure location. So do you believe that location exists? Do you believe it was bombed? Because if not, couldn't there be a whole lot of equipment and uranium there at the moment?
I think it's very possible that a secret location exists. I think it's also possible that what the location they were really referring to was something attached to already an existing site, but just a new part of it. Iran is always trying to increase their leverage as well. And so the IAEA report that came out the Thursday, the very day that the Israelis struck, which is not a surprise that it happened that day, because I think the Israelis were waiting for that diplomatic result that Iran was not in compliance with its non-proliferation obligations. They were waiting for that to happen in order to be able to have some additional diplomatic cover for their actions. I think it made very clear that it wasn't that the Iranians may have an additional site, and that could be a real threat. Whether it was bombed or not, I think depends on whether or not it was attached to an existing one or we're talking about a new one, and I don't think we know that yet.
And Jonathan, if President Trump is knowingly exaggerating the reality on the ground, what do you think his motivations could be for doing that? There is the Trump being Trump, yes, he always exaggerates argument. There's also this idea that maybe if he's overstating it, it is because he's trying to resist Israeli pressure for the United States to keep going on their bombing missions against Iran.
I think President Trump's use of language has always been colorful. I think we've seen that for a lot of years. And sometimes I think it leads to certain terms that are not as precise as maybe he intended them, or certainly as the U.S. government officials would prefer. I also think that President Trump was really determined to end this conflict. The U.S. had a very narrow role, a very precise role, and I think you could see that there was leverage that he exerted because he bombed Fordo. It provided that leverage to stop the Israelis from going further, from continuing this operation for another number of days or even weeks. And so I'm sure that the president wanted to really be quite clear to both his domestic constituency what a success this was, and maybe to the Israelis as well. But the reality is the U.S. and the Israelis are very much in sync when it comes to sharing information. And so I think the Israelis are also going to be able to look at it one way or the other and say, okay, was it actually obliterated, or was it just diminished, or was it just parts of it were destroyed but not all of it? I think all of that is going to come out. I think the more important thing is less about the specific language used, but the fact that it's been massively set back. And again, regardless of whether massively set back is many months or years, from the Israeli perspective where they were, which is that Iran was only a few weeks away, that then is a massive change in the timeline that Israel is going to feel like, okay, there's not an existential threat literally days to weeks away, and that's a big change in how the population is seeing it and in their politics.
Jonathan, how dangerous do you think it is if Iran managed to hide 400 odd kilos of 60% enriched uranium? Or is it okay as long as all the facilities were taken out?
It's not okay if the facilities were taken out unless you also think Iran does not have any of the secret facilities that we were talking about a little earlier. The challenge is, look, getting from 60% to 90% is not going to take much. 90% being weapons grade uranium, what we would use for an actual nuclear weapon. The bigger question is still on the weaponization. And a lot of the weaponization happened, research and development was being done at a different site, at Esfahan. And I think there's going to be some significant questions about whether or not the pieces related to the weaponization were taken out. It appears that they may have been. And so when you combine that part of it with the assassination of so many of the nuclear scientists, I think it probably does create a bit of a knowledge gap in Iran. That knowledge gap will not last forever. And so whether you're talking about the 400 kilograms or a secret site or new scientists coming online or weaponization, at the end of the day, they all point to the same question. You're still going to need some level of diplomacy to actually reduce the potential that Iran has a nuclear program in the future. Or the other option is there should be an expectation that Israel, probably, maybe the US, is going to have to strike again sometime in the future. And that could be years from now. But the idea that this episode is now completely and permanently closed once for all because of military action, I think is unfortunately probably wrong.
Jonathan Panikoff, thank you for joining us on Planet America.
Thanks for having me.
This week's Democratic Party primary for Mayor of New York City has taken on outsized significance. The former governor of the state of New York, Andrew Cuomo, was trying to make a political comeback 4 years after resigning over sexual harassment allegations following a decade in power.
Did I always do everything right in my years of government service? Of course not. Would I do some things differently, knowing what I know now? Certainly. Did I make mistakes? Some painfully? Definitely. And I believe I learned from them and that I am a better person for it.
Did I ask myself a lot of questions? Of course I did. That mea culpa and Cuomo's name recognition as both a former governor himself and the son of a former multi-term governor, Mario Cuomo, saw Andrew Cuomo leading in the polls by miles for months until York Assemblyman Zohran Mamdani, a Democratic Socialist, emerged as a fresh face with progressive ideas like free childcare, free buses and a rent freeze. And Mamdani wasn't afraid to take Cuomo on head on. Cuomo, who himself has a reputation for being a bit of a political bully. For example, here is when Cuomo questioned Mamdani on his lack of experience in the primary debate.
I have never had to resign in disgrace. I have never cut Medicaid. I have never stolen hundreds of millions of dollars from the MTA. I have never hounded the 13 women who credibly accused me of sexual harassment. I have never sued for their gynecological records, and I have never done those things because I am not you.
He got burned. Mamdani jumped from barely 1% support in February to claim a stunning victory this week.
We made history. In the words of Nelson Mandela, it always seems impossible until it is done. My friends, we have done it.
So who is this guy, this Mandela-quoting giant killer of a political newcomer? He's 33 years old. Zohran Mamdani was born in Uganda to Indian parents. His mother, Myra Nair, is a filmmaker. She directed a lot of films you'd have probably heard of, including Monsoon Wedding. His father, Mahmoud, is an anthropology professor at Columbia University. Like a lot of Democratic Socialists, Mamdani had the endorsement of fellow progressives, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Bernie Sanders. 67-year-old Andrew Cuomo was very much the establishment candidate. He had Bill Clinton's backing and that of the old guard of Democratic politics. This primary battle was probably the most consequential since the Democratic presidential primaries, back when they all dropped out and endorsed Joe Biden, stopped Bernie Sanders becoming the nominee in early 2020. And for Andrew Cuomo, this could mark the end of his political career, although he does have the option of trying to run for mayor as an independent now.
It was not our night. Tonight was Assemblyman Mamdani's night, and he put together a great campaign, and he touched young people and inspired them and moved them and got them to come out and vote.
If elected, Mamdani would be the first Muslim mayor of New York City, which is a city as well with a large Jewish population, and that is likely to be a potential issue for him and some voters. So this election and his performance, if he's elected, could have an impact as well on the 2028 presidential contest. And maybe that's why the former New Yorker Donald J. Trump immediately weighed in.
Zohran Mamdani, a 100% communist lunatic, has just won the Dem primary and is on his way to becoming mayor. We've had radical lefties before, but this is getting a little ridiculous.
And speaking of a little ridiculous,
he looks terrible. His voice is grating. He's not very smart. Yes, this is a big moment in the history of our country.
Yeah, I just can't put my finger on it. He just doesn't, I don't know, something about how he looks just isn't right somehow. I don't know what that is. Mamdani, though, he wouldn't be the first Democratic Socialist to be elected mayor of an American city. Bernie Sanders himself was mayor of Burlington, Vermont in the 1980s, and there have been others. But this is New York, New York, which has an annual budget of over $100 billion. The city employs 300,000 workers. So a lot is riding on this for those who are for Mamdani, as well as those who are very much against him.
Oh, yeah. He's got some people against him, all right. You were speculating about Trump's motivation for attacking him. Well, you need no speculation for some of the haters out there, like Trump buddy and unofficial advisor Laura Loomer tweeting, "There'll be another 9/11 in New York City and Zohran Mamdani will be to blame." And conservative pundit Benny Johnson tweeted, "New York City in 2001, we will never forget. New York City in 2025 elects Muslim jihadists." So yeah, I reckon they could be a little bit bigoted. Just a teensy bit. But look, there's a lot more to Mamdani than his religion. For instance, John, you didn't even mention the most interesting thing about him, which is his previous career as a rapper.
Go ahead, make a rap for your nanny. It's a rap. Get the guap, spin the rack on your nanny. Spin the rack. Come through, give a dap to your nanny. If you're really feeling good, spin a track for your nanny. Go ahead, make a rap for your nanny. It's a rap. Get the guap, spin the rack on your nanny. Spin the rack. Come through, give a dap to your nanny. If you're really feeling good, spin a track for your nanny.
good call buying the shirt, buddy. That might have helped him in the Nana vote. I have no idea.
Thank God he went into politics.
You are right, though, about him being a socialist. He's got some pretty left-wing policies. Let's see. City-owned and run grocery stores.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. There's a Democratic Socialist mayor in Chicago who tried a similar thing, and in the end, even the Democrats in the state legislature voted that down. So he turned around and opened a handful of city-run farmers markets. So, sometimes compromise is important.
Grocery stores have a profit margin of like 1%.
Right.
How are you going to underbid them? And there's one on every block in New York. They're just run by small businesses. They're migrants.
Yeah.
Why is he competing against them?
That may not be realistic. Some of them, though, really did catch on.
Yeah. The free city buses was very popular, I think. And I can see the idea behind that.
Yep.
The free childcare. That's going to be popular.
I mean, if they can do free childcare. They're talking about raising taxes dramatically on people earning over $1 million a year.
2% extra flat tax.
Right, and they're talking about borrowing literally billions of dollars as well to pay for some of these things, which would definitely ease cost of living pressures for New Yorkers. It's an expensive city to live and work in.
And this will make a difference, a $30 an hour minimum wage. How about $30 an hour ABC wage? I'll take that. Anyway, at the end of the day, Mamdani's biggest boost probably came from, like you mentioned before, running against Andrew Cuomo. This is a guy who is seemingly going out of his way to get people offside for decades. I mean, how many governors out there have been slapped down by the Supreme Court? 9-0. He's united the Supreme Court. He's also been credibly accused of perjuring himself in front of the Senate. Let's not forget that. And his super PAC that's behind his campaign is being propped up by Trump supporters like Bill Ackman. It's led to catchy slogans like this one from Cynthia Nixon from Sex and the City. Do not rank Trump billionaire-funded sex predator Andrew Cuomo. That kind of sums it up, John. Strangely, though, Mamdani's very likely to face Cuomo again because of New York's weird electoral system. They've got what you call a fusion system. What that means is people can be nominated by several parties. So they'll be on several lines of the ballot. Then all of those lines get added up together for their total vote, right? That's called fusion. That's the fusion, right? Andrew Cuomo, he'll presumably be nominated by the front party that he set up himself called Fight and Deliver. And then he and Mamdani can just go at it again in the general election. Not just them, though. There'll probably be 4 candidates other than Mamdani. There'll be current Mayor Eric Adams. He's running as an independent. The Republican that Adams previously ran against, Curtis Sliwa. There's a moderate prosecutor, Jim Walden, and then Andrew Cuomo, should he be up for it. They will be running together. But importantly, that general election does not have preferential voting, or as they call it, ranked choice voting, like the primary did. So will some of these candidates split the vote in weird ways so one of them ends up flying ahead? I don't know. We'll have to find out.
Yeah, it's unknowable at this stage because Mayor Eric Adams, who is a moderate Democrat, more in the mould of Andrew Cuomo or Joe Biden, has basically become a Trump Republican after Trump pardoned him. That was a favour. Meanwhile, the likely Republican nominee, Curtis Sliwa, he was actually in Australia quite a bit in the 1990s. He founded that organisation, the vigilante group, the Guardian Angels, the red beret-wearing people that had kind of cleaned up the subway in New York in the 1980s. He came out to Australia. But the confusing thing about this is that Curtis Sliwa reportedly does not get along with Donald Trump and vice versa. I don't know if this was some tiff in a nightclub in the 80s, but these guys don't get along. So it's possible that Trump does not support Curtis Sliwa. Trump could, in fact, support the former Democrat running as independent, Eric Adams, who's more of a moderate Democrat, becoming quite Trumpy as well. So this is really a very muddy race in all of this. But for more, we are joined by Grace Mausser. She is the co-chair of the Democratic Socialists of New York City. Grace, welcome to Planet America's Situation Room. Can you explain for us how it was possible that your guy, Zohran Mamdani, was able to go from barely 1% in the polls in February to winning this primary this week?
Yes, it's crazy. It's very exciting. But the core of the campaign was really mobilizing over 50,000 volunteers who knocked over 1.6 million doors here in the city. They phone banked, they text banked. Any way you could reach a voter, we did it. And the core of that really was mobilizing organizations that had big memberships in the city. So organizations like my own, New York City Democratic Socialists of America, and many others in the coalition. And the way that he did that, the way that he reached people not only in our organizations, but well beyond that, was by having really clear, consistent messaging around affordability. New York is expensive, and the people who are here deserve to be able to afford to live. And Zohran hit on that over and over again, and it resonated with almost 500,000 New Yorkers on Tuesday.
Mamdani's certainly not short of a policy, Grace. Were there one or two ideas in particular that you think cut through specifically and might have led to that late momentum at the end?
Yeah, well, I mean, really, there were three that he hit on all together, all the time. It was freeze the rent, fast and free buses, and universal childcare. The most expensive two things for any New Yorker is rent, and then any New Yorker with a child knows that almost as expensive as rent is childcare, especially for kids who are too young to go to public school yet. In the city, it costs almost as much to send your kid to one of our public universities as it does to send them to daycare. So that really resonated with New Yorkers across demographics, across ages, across races. We all deserve to have lower rents, and we all deserve to be able to set roots here and raise a family.
Grace, Mamdani skeptics say even if you tax the rich, even if you borrow billions of dollars, which he's planning to do, some of these things are so much easier said than done. And the Democratic Socialist mayors in other cities have tried things like free buses, city-run grocery stores, and they get into all sorts of difficulties with regulation, with the assembly, with the state government. It's just not going to happen.
I mean, those skeptics, those pundits want business as usual to continue. If that was what New Yorkers wanted, they would have voted for Cuomo, right? He's the epitome of the political establishment. But they're ready to try something new. And I feel really good about Zohran's ability to enact that because of those 50,000 volunteers that I mentioned, because of those organizations that I've mentioned. We have led fights as the Democratic Socialists of America to raise taxes on the rich before. We did that in 2021, and we won a $4 billion increase in revenue for the state. And we're ready to do it again with an even more galvanized and excited base of people. So it'll definitely be a challenge, but backing away from challenges is why the Democrats have lost over and over and over again in the U.S. And taking on new and exciting ideas is how we move the country forward, and frankly, how we push back against Trump and the rising authoritarianism we see here.
Do you think the ranked choice system that New York has made any difference at all to the way Mamdani came through at the end, or do you think it was irrelevant?
No, I think it was actually really important. So this is only the second time in a mayoral election that New Yorkers have used ranked choice voting. 2021 was the first time. And I think Zohran won a plurality of the vote. So in a traditional election, he still would have won. But I think what ranked choice voting let happen is the non-Cuomo candidates to really band together and not start fighting each other. We saw two different cross endorsements of Zohran. So Brad Lander, another candidate, and Michael Blake both endorsed Zohran, told their supporters to rank him number 2 behind them. And I think that was really key because no one else who was running in the progressive lane, or just even in the moderate but slightly left of Cuomo lane, took the opportunity to punch left, right? No one was attacking Zohran for being radical. Only Cuomo was doing that, and everyone else was able to get together and stand together and try to fight Cuomo. So I think it was actually important, and it is a new way of campaigning in America, and I think a better one.
Grace, there is still the possibility that Governor Cuomo could run an independent campaign for mayor in November and divide the Democratic vote. Some Democrats in New York, I'm thinking Lauren Gillen is talking about Mamdani being extreme and, quote, an anti-Semite. We've seen Bernie Sanders in 2016 and 2020 get blocked by the establishment coalescing around a more moderate political figure. Could that happen again?
They're definitely going to try. I mean, various corporations and billionaires like Michael Bloomberg put $30 million into the primary. I'm sure they will try to do it in the general election again. Confusingly, the general election will not be ranked choice voting. It will be first past the post. So there is certainly the opportunity for Andrew Cuomo and Eric Adams and the Republican nominee, who I believe will be a politician named Curtis Sliwa, to cannibalize each other's base. Hopefully they waste a lot of millionaires' money while they're doing that. But I think there will definitely be an attempt to do that. What we have, though, with the Zohran campaign is an opportunity to build on the base that has already been created with his election. So like I said, almost 500,000 New Yorkers voted for him last Tuesday. But there's even more New Yorkers who are maybe not registered to vote yet, who are registered as independent, so they are not able to vote in our closed primary system. And those New Yorkers are probably people who feel abandoned by our political system. And with a new vision, with a Democratic Socialist running for office, I think it's an opportunity to reach them and really encourage them to vote and to get involved.
Grace, in a recent interview, Mamdani said the following: "I clearly have ideas in politics, but ultimately, beyond all of those things, I care most about outcomes. The way that I would approach running the city is to be wedded to outcomes, not wedded to the means by which we get to those outcomes." Are the Democratic Socialists ready for a figurehead who's a pragmatist?
I mean, absolutely. I've said over and over again that one thing that has made the Democratic Socialists of America different from other left groups and from previous iterations of left groups in the late 20th and early 21st century is that we are committed to winning races. We don't run just for fun. We don't run just to make a moral point, although there are certainly moral points to be made. We run races when we think that there's a real path to victory. And we run legislative campaigns and issue campaigns when we see a real path to success. So I would actually say that Zohran's outlook there is, in fact, a product of one of his political homes being the Democratic Socialists of America. We want outcomes. We want to be winners. We want there to be actual change that we're affecting and that we help bring about in the world.
I suppose, Grace, in the immediate term, obviously, you've got an election to win, and then it's about those cost of living pressures for New Yorkers. But, of course, the world is watching Mamdani, and it will have a bearing on primary races for next year's congressional midterms. It'll potentially have an influence on whether a progressive candidate can emerge from a Democratic field in 2028 to be the next presidential nominee. So the stakes here nationally, given that this is America's biggest city, this is a big test.
It definitely is. I mean, that's part of what has made it so exciting. We've passed our first test, the primary election, with flying colors. But I think what I'm hoping a lot of the rest of the Democratic establishment takes away from this is that cost of living issues, messaging that speaks to the material concerns of working and middle class Americans, resonates with people. That is how we take down Trump and his allies. We don't do it by attempting to triangulate some imaginary position between fascism and progressivism that speaks to a made-up version of an American voter. We do it by actually trying to address what matters to them. And we know what matters. People's rent is too high. Their mortgages are too high. Childcare is unaffordable. Groceries are out of control. We know what matters. And we should talk about that. And that's what socialists believe. That's what Zohran's doing. And New York has shown that can win.
Grace Mausser, great to talk to you. Thank you very much for taking the time for us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Now, Planet America has a program break coming up, which not for the first time coincides with a major news story. When we had a break this time last year, Trump was nearly assassinated. A couple of years before that, Trump tried to overturn an election result during our program break. So who knows what might happen in the next couple of weeks. But there are some things that we know that we'll be keeping an eye on. In a new and possibly one-off segment we're calling Known Knowns.
There are known knowns. There are things we know we know.
And one thing we know is that, like us, Americans are heading off on a break. July is their summer driving season. So with unrest in the Middle East, it's probably going to be worth keeping an eye out on gasoline prices in the United States. It is one of the pressure points for inflation, which so far hasn't spiked as many had expected because of the tariff war. Speaking of which, another major deadline for tariff deals is looming. Those Liberation Day tariff pauses expire on July 8. And while Trump promised 90 deals in 90 days, he has delivered one at best. That's the one with the UK. And in the middle of that period comes America's Independence Day, as well, the 4th of July. The last national day before next year's big one, the 250th birthday of the United States of America. So, Chaz, I'll be keeping an eye out for what is going to be the tone of July 4th this year after the parade a couple of weeks ago. Is it going to be militaristic? Is it going to be just generally American and patriotic? Or is it going to be full-blown Trump MAGA?
Well, first of all, don't worry about the oil prices, John, because Trump has debuted a great new way of keeping them low during the war. He just yells at them on Truth Social. Everyone, keep oil prices down. I'm watching. You're playing right into the hands of the enemy. Don't do it. I'm sure they'll do the trick. What I'm looking forward to, John, is seeing what happens with some hot new whistleblower testimony.
Really?
Erez Rubini was a highly successful DOJ attorney who threw his career away when he admitted, if you recall, in court, that it was a mistake that Kilmar Abrego Garcia had been sent to El Salvador. The government did not like that at all. Well, now he's spilled the beans about that whole episode. And it turns out that the guy Trump just nominated for an appeals court judgeship, Emil Bowe, he had his hearing yesterday, was right in the middle of it. Rubini said that Bowe told DOJ lawyers that Trump would soon invoke the Alien Enemies Act to rapidly fly a group of immigrants out of the country that weekend, which of course they ended up doing. And Bowe supposedly said that the planes needed to take off no matter what. Bowe then allegedly broached the possibility that a court order would enjoin those removals before they could be effectuated. But he allegedly said that DOJ would need to consider telling the courts, "F you," and ignore any such order. So, according to Rubini, this man who now wants to be a judge specifically ordered DOJ lawyers to disobey a direct court order from a judge. Needless to say, Bowe completely denied this in his hearing. He said he had no memory of any of this occurring, which is interesting because Rubini's account also suggests that he has quite a trail of emails, texts and phone records that would support his version of events. It seems that Rubini and his lawyer buddies like keeping receipts. And it just so happens that this story is central to the current trial of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. And a judge in that trial is not going to let this go at all. So I am very intrigued to see how this story develops, John.
Yes, and if you're wondering why would Emil Bowe be doing so many favours for Donald Trump, he is Donald Trump's former personal attorney, and word is that he may be heading for the Supreme Court of the United States, not just a federal appeals court. Meanwhile, Reporting also suggests that by the time we're back, Abrego Garcia may have already been deported again before he can get back into court. So we will see. But that is it for our trip to Planet America. We are heading off on that production break for a couple of weeks, but we will be back soon. Check your local guides for time.
There's a brand new pep dropping right now. You'll find it right there. Oh, and also a big hi to my favourite uncle, Uncle Peter. You're a good-looking man.
Bye-bye.